Good morning, everybody, and welcome to TLC Live. Today we have an amazing guest in the studio and Orlando Sanchez.
Hey, everybody. Were you talking about me or Andy?
Andy.
Okay. So, yeah, we have a couple of veterans today that have served our country well. Actually, three, because I'm an Air Force veteran.
That's right.
Andy Valadez is a Marine veteran, and our guest standing by is a Navy veteran. And Andrea's just a veteran because she's been around a while.
I'm a veteran because of my age. I'm about to be 50 next year.
So, anyway, Andy Valadez is the head of, what's it called, Andy? Dynamic Marketing?
Marketing Dynamics.
Marketing Dynamics. He is very involved in the community and has been serving the city of Houston, Harris County, and veterans for quite some time. So tell us a little bit about your military background and tell us a little bit about what you're doing through your marketing firm.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for having me, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about marketing, exciting stuff.
I know, it's fun. It's
Right?
fun.
So I'm classically trained as a marketing guy, but I grew up in Bryan College Station and always wanted to graduate from A&M. But life took me to Austin, Texas, where I met my lovely wife. We've been together going on 40 years.
And you were saying that she's a CPA.
Yeah, she's a CPA.
So I imagine a CPA with a marketing guy. So it has to be a balance in the house.
I'm like therapy for her because
Imagine.
everything doesn't add up,
I know.
on a spreadsheet, nice and neat. We have two beautiful girls. One is a senior at Texas State University, and I've got a young girl that's going to A&M this year to study forensics. I've always had the entrepreneur bug, even when I was a child. But before that, I did a time in the Marine Corps and served from 88 to 92. And for my generation, you may recall the Beirut bombing of 83.
Correct.
We lost 241 Marines and servicemen there. And one of my buddies was actually killed there. So he actually had an impact on me wanting to serve because it was a rude awakening, for my wife and I young, dating back then. Life was dangerous per se, even though we were 17, I think my wife was about 15 then. And so when I joined the Marine Corps, I wanted to go into a program that offered a way for them to pay for my last years of college. I wanted to fly Cobras, and ultimately part of the program would pay for my last years at school. That program kind of went away, but I wound up getting out of the Marine Corps and graduating from A&M, and I went to corporate America from 93.
I didn't know you were an Aggie.
Yes, sir. I was a class of 93 and did the corporate America thing, but I always had the entrepreneur bug. So in 1999, I had actually prayed at the company I was working with. I said, Lord, either shut a door or open a door.
Mm-hmm.
And how audacious is that, right?
I know.
to go before the Lord like that. But the next day I got laid off.
Oh.
And rather than it be a sad thing, it was actually kind of an exciting thing. I was driving home, but then I started thinking, remember I was telling you my wife's a CPA.
Uh-huh.
I said, wait a minute, what's my wife going to think about this? So anyway, I've been serving the community since 1999, and we can kind of go into more on that later.
Well, good. And then standing by is Vicki Cruz. Vicki, are you with us?
I am here.
Well, Andrea's going to introduce you, but I know that Vicki has an undergraduate degree, an MBA. She's an ordained minister. What else?
And she's a mother of three also, and she's also a veteran, and she's a wife of a veteran. So, Vicky, just tell us a little bit of your background.
So my background, I'm a former wife. My dad's a U.S. Marine. He served in Vietnam, so I'm a daughter of a Vietnam veteran. I then became a wife for U.S. Navy, who served. He actually retired, and I was fortunate enough to be a veteran's wife for 10 years. Then I ended up joining the Navy as well. And then my oldest son joined the Navy, so I'm a mother of a veteran.
Vicki, you're also involved in the community in many ways. I understand you're a member of the GI Forum, right?
That's right.
You want to explain a little bit about what the GI Forum is and what it does?
Oh, absolutely. So we basically continue the advocacy for our veterans, ensuring that our veterans have resources. We maintain connectedness. I'm actually the chaplain for the American GI Forum, so I serve as someone who stands on our faith, and just petitioning God for any sort of needs for our veterans. So whether it's going to the hospitals, meeting them halfway, whether they're homeless, reaching out, we're out there advocating for our homeless.
In addition to your membership in the GI Forum, you're also involved in another civil rights organization known as LULAC.
Correct.
And what do you do within LULAC?
Well, Lulac has been around for a really long time, and I felt that in the season where we are at in our country, I felt as though that we together as Latinos should rise up. I hold the position as a president. And so I'm the president of our Council 2911 of Hope in the Future. And so we kind of advocate for different things right now. We're working with our veterans. We have several projects going on. We're also working with immigration as well. And then providing resources to all Latinos. And we're working on other projects with currently with our Vietnamese veterans and community.
So today we're talking about, veterans helping veterans, but also she's talking about, the immigration issue, which is a big issue right now in the country.
Yeah, I'll say. Everybody wants to come here.
Yeah, of course.
So I want to go back a little bit. Vicki, can you tell us a little bit about the history of the GI Forum? And by the way, for those watching, LULAC stands for the League of United Latin American Citizens. It started off as a civil rights organization. But Vicki, do you know the history of the GI Forum?
Yeah, the history of the GI Forum as well. The forum's been around for about 100 years. And so I mean, it started off with several veterans coming together and it said, hold on one second. I'm so sorry. I gotta this.
Okay, we lost Vicki. So, Andy, what are you doing in the community with our veterans?
Okay, so one of the principles that I learned while I was in the Marine Corps was volunteerism, and I had an awesome XO, was a grunt in the Marines, and because of the program I was applying for, encouraged me to volunteer, so that stuck with me. So I've always been connected, like when I first got to Houston with the Marine Corps League here in Houston, the Macklemore Detachment, which is one of the oldest detachments in the state. It was founded in 1923. Did a lot more volunteering. I was teaching karate at the time and doing some Bible teaching at my church or whatnot, and finally had to cut some things. So I kind of got out of that for a little bit and then got reconnected here recently. But prior to that, I've been working with the American Legion here in Houston. There's 13 posts. I'm at post 164 and currently operate as the PR officer for the Katy area, but just got promoted to the 22nd District of Department of Texas. So we'll now be training my other PR officers to do what I do.
For those watching, tell them what the GI Forum is and what.
Well, the American Legion.
I mean the American Legion. By the way, I'm a member.
Yes.
So
we're going to find out which post you're with.
Well, I know which one I'm with. I don't know the number, but it's off
right.
of navigation out on the east side of town.
When Vicki comes back, she'll
probably know.
Right.
But so tell us a little bit about the American Legion.
So
I mean, it's not just a place where veterans gather to have a beer and have some camaraderie.
We do some of that, but it's mainly a business, a volunteer organization. It's been around for over 100 years as well. And so the basic pillars of the American Legion are Americanism, national security, veterans rehabilitation. So if you've got veterans to get out of service, how to get employment, how to get their service and medical care if they need it, that kind of thing. And then also working with the youth and children. So it's very simplistic, 4 pillars, and we have various things that we do at the American Legion to support that mission.
And how many chapters are in Houston?
Well, right now there's 13 posts, about 4,000 members.
Yeah, and they're all over the state and all over America.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a member of one Legion post, you have privileges at other posts.
Right. So as a member, you can attend the members' meetings, and then if you have an idea, I mean, that's kind of my role as a PR officer, is like, how do we reach the next generation? The 20, 30, 40-year-old veterans that have families, that are still building their careers or starting businesses. We were the fittest in boot camp, and maybe while we were in service, and maybe after service, getting back into fitness training, that kind of thing. So we're looking at getting involved in reaching the next generation.
What do you think's the biggest need among veterans? What do you see out there?
Well, for the most part, I see membership and involvement, because once you're in, you're going to find something that you like, and then you're going to get involved. Like some of the stuff that Vicki was talking about. There's food drives, there's voting registration, there's oratorical contests where kids can get scholarships. So getting the word out to the families.
Yeah, but I meant what within the veteran group? What are the biggest needs of veterans?
Employment, probably
Employment.
transitioning out of service. You know, we hear about the suicide rates. You know,
Yeah.
they say 21 a day or 22 a day, but in a lot of times it actually goes beyond that and comes back down. But the average is around 22. You've got family concerns. You know, their education, how they're going to pay for college. Even when my daughter went to Texas State, I didn't know about the Hazelwood Act. Just was working out at the gym, and the gun, he says, "Hey, have you heard about the Hazelwood Act?" And I said, "Well, no, I haven't. I mean, I used it when I was in school, but I thought it was only for me. But now it's legacy, you know, so it
Oh.
now applies to your children and even your grandchildren and your spouse if you don't use all your hours. Typically, in Texas, you get about 150 hours that could go towards college or towards what do you call it, trades, if you will."
So both of you are very involved, and both of you are veterans. But both of you, as you know, because of the name of the program is Texas Latino Conservatives, are conservatives, right? I know that Vicki was active. She was a precinct chairman in Harris County. I know you've been very active, certainly online and on your Facebook page.
Mm-hmm.
But both of you have some pretty conservative convictions and principles. What led you to that? Vicki, I'll ask you that question. What made you realize that you are a conservative? And by the way, Vicki, I do notice that you work, it doesn't matter for you what party someone is involved in if they need help. You serve everybody.
I serve everyone. Absolutely. And so I believe that my purpose is greater than any sort of political party. My purpose is to help all people and to help people, as you know, as a believer. To Christ. And for those who aren't, I work with all people, whether they're any sort of religion, any sort of affiliation. And so going back to your question, yes, I help all people.
Andy, what led you to your conservative principles?
So I would say my faith. You know, God says to love Him with all your heart and soul, and to also love one another. In its simplistic terms, I also heard it said in the vernacular that, you know, as long as you don't kill someone, you don't take their stuff, most people really are conservative.
Yeah.
You know, so those principles. I mean, I was a liberal once, but then I always tell people I grew up. I started looking at the bills I had to pay, the responsibilities I had,
Taxes you pay,
take care of our family. You know, when I'm out on the streets, because there's not enough police in the community per se. So it's up to us to be protectors of our little community or whatnot, and build relationships, that kind of thing. So that's kind of what led me is, how do you preserve those principles of free speech, which is under attack right now, the Second Amendment, which is under attack right now, the rights to own your property and not be taxed to death, if you will. That's another component.
Yeah.
Both of you served to this amazing country that I love. I'm from Colombia, but I came to this country in 1997, and I love this country. But both of you served this country. How do you feel about the direction that this country is going right now?
You want to answer first, Vicki?
It's worrisome. It's worrisome. I feel that people really need a plan. I feel that people need to rise above both parties and work together. And I don't see that happening. I see so much division. I see media creating more division than ever. And so I think that people must not lose who they really are. They must embrace who they are. Whether it's working with the African community, the Latino community, and what have you. Just to go back to your question about creating the Latino, the Blue Light Council. That was one of the things that I felt that we need to have a higher voice. That we need to have and empower and show our nation who we are as Latino.
Okay. I don't know if we lost her or she froze up again. I think her internet connection might be a little weak. But yeah, I mean, but I'm always troubled by that we have to stand up and rise and show people who we are. I mean, I always consider myself an American. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm of my original nationality is Cuban, but I'm a proud American. I mean, a veteran of the United States Air Force. And, I always like to look at ourselves as America's a great experiment, right? People from every nation come here, become patriots of this country, and become, proud citizens of the United States. And do you feel that way? I mean, do you feel that we're assigning too many labels to ethnicity, to gender, to sex, to nationality, to ethnicity?
identity politics, right? So I guess the best lesson I learned, when I decided to join the Marine Corps, it wasn't about the individual. It was about the platoon or your fire team, and they took you from being an individual down to being nothing, if you will, and then built you back up, right? And so the reason I have zeroed in on the veteran, because I believe as goes the veteran goes the nation. And of course, in the military, we're taught to be apolitical. In a lot of our organizations, American Legion, Marine Corps League, et cetera, they're taught to be apolitical. So I also saw there were statistics that a lot of vets don't necessarily vote. It's like 33%, something to that effect. Yeah,
that's big.
But that's maybe because of the conditioning, whatever. So that's why I like about the American Legion. If it has to do with national security, which to me the border is an issue, that's national security. Those issues we need to be talking about, as veterans, if you will. When it comes to Americanism, teaching the next generation, about our heritage, our flag, our Constitution. Those are important values to pass on to the next generation, right? But again, you're not just talking about the veteran, you're talking about the spouse, and you're talking about the family. And I forget how many veterans there are in the U.S., but it's like 1% of the population actually serve. But it also goes for law enforcement, as goes the pastors. And so the Bible says, take down the strong man and woman, then you can take down the house. And so our leaders are under attack. And they've got to realize they're under attack, but they also have to say, you know what, there are solutions, and I need to get involved in my community so that, our nation does stay the shining light on a hill, and our flag still waves, that kind of thing. Not making it too jingoistic or too patriotic, if you will.
And I think, you say family is very important on this. And I think the first education comes, of course, from the family. You said that you have an 18 years old and what is the other?
She's 21. She just turned 21.
21 and 18 years old. So I have twins. They're 16. So the education started in the house. What do you do with your kids? You're conservative. You feel that you're conservatives. And I think many parents are failing in teaching their kids their values. These days, it's like you see like kids are doing whatever they want, and they are only in the video games, and they're not teaching the values in the family. What do you do with your kids, and what do you think families should do, to pass the values and the love for this country?
That's a great question, because it used to be Little House on the Prairie, but now it's Little House on the Freeway.
Yeah.
So before my wife and I had kids, we used to volunteer and teach Bible study to the youth. And then once we had our own kids, we had the responsibility to teach them. So we got them involved in entrepreneurship and acting, doing things that were of interest to them. As they got old, started to get older, we prayed, do we put them in a private school or do we put them in the public school? But by then we felt confident enough that, we want them to be an influencer of the culture, not the other way around. But the culture actually influenced them. And so we had to teach them some practical lessons. Like one time I bought my youngest daughter some tickets to her favorite band, Pierce the Veil. Tickets were like $300, but they were front line seats, and I had a budget for concessions and a budget for merchandise. So as I was taking her to the concert, I said, "Hey, baby, you're learning some things in school that we don't quite agree with, but let me just share a practical experience with you." I said, "Why don't we pick two random kids out on the street and give them your tickets and your money and your concessions?" And she's like, "No, why would I do that?" Exactly. Yeah. So she understood the principles of socialism at that early stage, but it was a practical lesson. I think it lived with her, until now, if you will.
It's interesting you say that because I tell people that the Marxists, the socialists, the communists, whatever you want to call them, the far left has a very long runway. Conservatives plan for the next election. Right. Oh, how do we hold the state house? How do we win Congress back? But the Marxists, communists look at 15 years down the road. What can we do to infiltrate organizations that'll secure the outcomes that we need in the future? And so it's media, it's education, it's higher education, it's destroying the ability of the community to practice whatever religion they just bring down religion. And so this morning I started looking at, you can go on Google and there's a massive amount of headlines that show up on Google if you just scroll down, And I can't tell you, and I'll put it on Facebook, by the way, my personal Facebook page, how many stories were about people demanding more stimulus, extension of unemployment, in light of the fact we can't find employees, right?
Yeah.
They wanted the moratorium on the evictions. They want a guaranteed paycheck. There was one guy, the Asian American that ran for president last time, was promising everybody a paycheck for $1,000, whether you worked or not. I mean, is socialism, the left is out of control in this country. I mean, the idea of, going out and working and paying your taxes so that we can help the least among us. Now everybody's the least among us. Everybody now deserves a check, deserves rent, deserves, assistance with food. I mean, socialism is great, Andy, until until you hit a deficiency in OPM. You know what OPM is, right? Other people's money.
Right.
So, Andrea and I have seen it because, at least I have, coming from a communist country. But, it's amazing how many young people, and you're talking about inculcating those values on your child, don't understand that socialism just hasn't worked anywhere.
Right. We had the same conversation with my eldest. She's 21. Now she's reflecting on her youth and things that we were teaching her, and it's starting to make sense to her. I remember I was liberal once, and then I grew up. That's kind of what she's going through right now. But I'm reading a really good book right now called Generation Z, because that is a population that you're having to kind of reteach, because they don't know the stuff that we know. And I think that's what you're dealing with when it comes to the Democrats. They think we're crazy. But you know what? The interesting thing about smart people is they look crazy to people that aren't so wise, if you will. I'll put it nicely. But with millennials and Generation Z, they've been flooded with all kinds of stuff that doesn't work, that you kind of almost have to spoon feed them again to reintroduce them to our history, to things that work versus things that don't work. And they're looking for truth. That's the other part that I'm discovering with the millennials and Generation Z. They're looking for someone to tell them the truth. Now, Generation Z grew up really fast. They lost their childhood because of smartphones being exposed. So
that's my kids.
But they're more likely to ask the parents for advice. They're going to make their own decisions, and they're concerned about global warming per se. They're concerned about gender issues, social dynamics. They're more entrepreneurial.
Yes.
They do want to, and they're stressed about how they're going to pay for debt, that kind of thing. But they're open to input. If we can only reach them. I think the conservatives we can.
Well, Elizabeth Warren's going to take care of that.
Well, not if we educate first. So they've done a great job of winding back.
It's just amazing. It's just an endless list of goodies that the liberals, not only free money, free rent. Now Elizabeth Warren just yesterday was out talking about student loan forgiveness. Are you kidding me? There's no such thing as student loan forgiveness. Your debt doesn't just vanish. Somebody absorbs the cost, and guess who's going to absorb the cost?
The taxpayers.
The taxpayers.
Like we are absorbing everything that is going on in this country right now. Everybody's like, it's free money that is coming every month. Like nothing is for free. We are gonna end up paying for everything, and now people don't want to work, and business owners are struggling, trying to hire people, and people call for a job opportunity, and they have a schedule 10 or 12 interviews, and maybe only 1 or 2 show up. I mean, they are struggling with everything. I mean, you're a business owner. I don't know what is in your industry right now, but I know many of my friends are restaurant owners, and they're struggling. They say everybody wants to be out because now you cannot find a place in any restaurant. Everything is packed. But the same time is bad service because it's not employees. So it's crazy.
Well, I remember years back, you used to have a junior varsity. Was it junior achievement?
Yes, junior achievement in schools, and taught them about capitalism and entrepreneurship, responsibility, structuring debt, how to start a business. No, I mean the Marxists and the socialists won't allow that anymore.
So it's stuff. I'm taking a course now by a guy named Ty Lopez, and he's like, this is stuff that we should have learned in school. They're no longer teaching, right? Your social circle. You want to be. You see someone successful, well, go hang out with them. Find out why they're a success. Then people want to share their expertise, their knowledge, their wisdom. So that's why we've also been working with the Veterans Business Force that started here in Houston, and we also have a Veterans Business Chamber. So that these chambers a lot of times don't know how to connect with veterans per se. So we're going to help them to dovetail with the veteran community, because you do have a lot of VSOs. That's the veteran service organizations that are nonprofits, but they rely on the goodwill of the community to donate. Well, if people are strapped and they can't donate, those VSOs and other nonprofits suffer because just the onslaught of expenses and things that take away from the budget.
Why do our fellow veterans have such a hard time transitioning from the military into civilian life?
Well, I've heard different stories. Like during the Vietnam era, they just weren't thinking about it. You're a combat soldier, you come back and life has changed from where you knew it. I remember when my nephew came over from Iraq, I was kind of joking with him because usually I have these little door things to block my doors. I'm just safety conscious. I said, "Oh, I don't have any or something in the back." He goes, "Well, I'll sleep at the back of the door." I'm like, "What?" I said, "No, man, you're in America," because he was worried someone was going to break into our house in the middle of the night, right? So
It's like the time. It's like it didn't. I mean, it's like a frost. They're freezing on the time, and then when they come here, it's like, oh, when people are in jail, it's like kind of like that.
They don't know how to use a cell phone.
They don't know. They
In
just
jail,
come back
talk
to like, oh my God, what happened in the time? Like I lost 10 years or 5 years, whatever is the time, and everything changed. Especially now these days with technology, it's not even every year changes, every month or every week sometimes.
Well, so I guess it also gets down to geographics. When a vet gets out, do they go back to their hometown, their home state? Maybe there's not employment there for them. I know that Houston, they're looking for vets. A lot of our industries because they're already trained. They will follow orders. They're going to be good workers, that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
I think maybe the military is getting better at it than it was before. I know after I got out, really wasn't about necessarily going and finding a job right away. I mean, I worked a part-time job, but I was going to school. Then once I graduated, of course, they had the career center at A&M, so they helped me to get interviews, that kind of thing. So it wasn't really like a transitional thing, but the culture, could be some of it. Just coming out and having to
Yeah, no, I always thought the military could do a little better job when we're about to transition out and, get that DD Form 214, which is our discharge, separation papers. But I've often thought, because I had a lot of friends that stayed in the Air Force. I mean, I served several years active duty, and then I served with the Texas Air National Guard, and that allowed me to sort of transition back. And like you, I went to school. I took advantage of the GI Bill. But there's a lot of young guys that go in at 18 years of age. In the military, Andy, you know this, but the first thing they do is they give you a meal, and then they give you clothing, and then they shave, your head, and then you go to the immunization line where they give you, 16 different shots from yellow fever on down, right? And then they check your vision and your hearing and your, give you a great medical workup, and then they provide you housing, a clean bathroom and a bunk, and so you're taken care of literally, right, from the minute you go in, Andy. And then they give you an education. They train you in the mission you signed up for. So these guys are like, hey, this is great. Everything's done for me. I mean, it's one of the beautiful things about the military. They'll take a civilian kid at 18 years old and turn him in some kind of missile specialist, that can operate, drones from Nellis Air Force Base in the desert of Nevada and be attacking some target in the Middle East. Only the military does that well. But they don't do well in transitioning these guys that have served for 15 years, let's say, and then get out, because then these guys, as you say, it's like, whoa, things have changed in the workforce, or I've never been in the workforce. Could the military do a better job?
I'm sure they can. They will say that as well. I know that, American Legion, that's what we struggle with all the time. We do have a service officer, for example, at every post. The service officer's job is to find out what the vet needs. If he needs medical care or he needs to be qualified for whatever entitlement he deserves, then they actually have a formal process to go through on that. So now in boot camp, they actually made me pay for my uniforms. so that was
really,
yeah. So when my
boy,
wife
the Marine Corps sure is tight.
Oh yeah, so that's like I didn't have to pay for it. That was deducted from our pay. So, but
ours was free. Anything else after that, we had to buy at the. We called it the BX. You guys called it the what? PX. Yeah. Wonder what post exchange, is that what it came from? Ours was base exchange. But anyway, that's life in the military.
And we were talking in last week on our show. We were talking about the crime rate, and we were talking also the struggling that the police departments are having, recruiting people these days because nobody wants to become a police officer. What is the situation on the people wanting to go to military or serve this country. It's also the rate went down of people wanted to enjoy the forces.
Well, some of it was weight, as far as like fitness, being able to get in, because the standards are either high or they're low, and so when they're high, people can't get in, so they start to lower the standards even. So, years ago, I read a book by Colonel Grossman called Assassination Generation, because we were talking about the school shootings back when they were happening more often or whatnot. But you had generations that were playing the video games, that kind of thing. So maybe the motivation to go into the service is a lot different than it may have been in the past, per se. But even talk about how I got involved in politics. I'd never done politics before. Years ago, I auditioned for The Apprentice in Austin. I had to go in, and I thought it was going to be a business thing, and they wanted to ask him a political question. I'm like, wait a minute, we always heard the old adage, never mix business and politics. Well, they were asking, a political question there, and I was like the only conservative on the board. It was fireworks. Would have made for great TV. But a while back, we had a sheriff that was running for constitutional sheriff. I said, man, that's what we need in Harris County. We need a constitutional sheriff that's actually going to enforce the laws that we have and have accountability, because it's the highest office in the land. So that's what kind of motivated me to get into politics, because of the crime rate, those kinds of things. And I didn't hear politicians talking about, what, it's maybe your responsibility to be a strong leader in your community, so that you're aware of situations even in your own neighborhood. The police can't be everywhere.
Yeah.
They're understaffed as it is now, and now we're under the defund the police movement. So you almost have to, like, okay, if you want to be a policeman, there's something wrong with you to want to serve now, right? But people are servants. They are sheepdogs out there that do want to be protectors. And
Yeah.
they're doing it not because of the paycheck. They're doing it because they do want to be a servant to their community.
Yeah, I mean, nobody joins a police force in the United States to become wealthy. I mean, it's a sense of community
Same thing in the
service.
military.
Yeah. We don't join the military wanting to be multimillionaires, right? Yeah, it's unfortunate that we're in the state we're in, but it is what it is.
Right. So I've been a big proponent of the restoring our rights, and especially we just signed constitutional carry here in the state of Texas. It took about 8 years for that to happen, but I'm so glad that finally got signed into law.
Now, that's an interesting point. Let me talk to you a little bit about that. I have, I was under the old statute, which is license to carry, which, you have to submit your fingerprints, you get a background check, you take a course on how to handle your firearm, whether it's a semi-automatic or a revolver. You go to the shooting range, so the instructor gets to see that you can actually hit the side of a barn. And then the state gives you a license that you carry, that you have to show the peace officer when they pull you over, so the police officer knows, yes, you're armed, but you've also been through the safety course, and you have a background check. I thought that was a good system. Now, anybody in the state of Texas, if they don't have a criminal conviction, a felony conviction, can grab a gun, whether you know how to shoot it or not. Does that bother you?
So the basic premise is, if you can legally buy the gun, you can legally carry it. So,
Yeah, but does that bother you?
Well, it bothers me as a citizen if I decided I didn't want the license, because you can still get hemmed up. There's a lot of laws in the books that still get you in trouble. So the way I look at it as a Marine, I swore an oath to defend the Constitution, right? And the Second Amendment doesn't say anything about getting a license. And then I look even further when Jesus said in Luke 22:36 to go out and buy a sword. Now, under Roman occupation, it was illegal for the Jews to actually own a sword. It was a military-grade weapon that never ran out of bullets. Okay? And you didn't have to have a background check when Jesus said to go buy it. So the mere fact that he didn't say everybody go and be armed, there are some that need to think about it seriously, because it is a responsibility.
Yeah, I know, and this is an old question that we studied. Studied political science, and there's some John Locke wrote a book about this. It's called The State of Nature and Freedom, and
John Locke, yeah.
and he talked about the squirrels gathering their acorns, right? And that's the state of nature, right? A squirrel gathers its acorns and buries them, and then if some other squirrel comes, they beat them up, bite them, and that's okay. And I think that state works well in rural areas, where, but when you get into urban areas like Chicago, New York, Houston, I got to tell you, Andy, I kind of want, mental health affects all of us. maybe we go through a week of depression because something happens, or maybe we go through 3 years of depression. We may become addicted to substances. I kind of want people to be checked for their mental health status. Check a box that they don't have mental health issues. I'd like to know that people have refresher courses when they have a firearm. I'd like to know that, maybe you don't go to the gun range all the time, so at least every 5 years when you renew your license, you do go to the shooting range and you can shoot, and you know the difference between a 45 caliber and a 9mm. But now just anybody can grab a gun and carry it and tote it.
Yeah.
I've got to tell you, as a constitutional loving, freedom loving individual, I don't know. I struggle with it because I agree with you. I don't need the government to tell me as a free, law-abiding citizen that I need their permission to own a firearm. But they really don't, because we have that right. As a citizen of the United States and in the state of Texas, I am free to own a gun in my home. As many guns as I want. The government has no say-so whatsoever.
Well, it's an arsenal in California. It's a collection in Texas. If you have more than one.
Now, in an urban area like Houston, for me to tote a gun into a retail store, and I get mad at the guy in front of me or behind me who cuts in front of me, and I haven't been taking the courses because, with the right to carry permit, they did do a little education on when it's appropriate to defend yourself. They told you a little bit about the law. Most people don't even understand what the penal code says as a defense for taking another human's life. Mm-hmm. It's just like, okay, well, I'm mad, so here, I'm going to whip out my .45 and just plug you. And we're seeing that, Andy, on freeways all over Houston. That's got to be, disconcerting to a lot of people. It is to me.
Right. So the way I look at it is, in another way is that criminals already have their constitutional rights. So if you disarm the the good guy, then there's more bad guys around. At some point, what we've seen with even the license when it passed, that violent crime went down. So there may be
despite Commissioner Rodney Ellis, who was a senator at the time, and when Jerry Patterson introduced the right to carry, I still remember Commissioner Ellis hitting the floor of the Senate and said there would be mayhem and murder on the streets. And it really never happened, right? Never materialized. Mm-hmm. Those of us who were at the time concealed handgun, now licensed to carry, relatively zero crime rates among us.
And so, and a lot of these, gun laws actually have racist roots. They did not want the slaves to be armed, and so Texans got punished for that. And I think we righted history, and maybe it takes a little transition, unfortunately, but we're the 21st state. 20 other states have already passed constitutional carry. What's wrong with Texans? Are we that backwards that we can't handle the responsibility like the other 20 states that have already passed it? And that was the argument we were having with our governor and our legislators, who kept putting in speakers that were circumventing our rights. So my conversation with law enforcement, my conversation with military, you would not be law enforcement, you would not be in the military if it weren't for the taxpayer who paid for your training, who paid for your designation. They said, well, they had training. Yeah, but that was our job. Yeah, we got paid. That was our job. But the everyday citizen, I'm not going to argue against taking away their rights. I want them to have more of their rights to be able to protect their families against the bad people that are crazies, that are that you're worried about.
I understand what you're saying. In other words, don't put the burden on me as a responsible, law-abiding, constitutional, loving person who believes in the Second Amendment. That's why we as citizens have the penal code in Texas.
Yeah, if you mess up, it is a serious thing.
That penal code is designed by the people of Texas through their elected representatives. So we're okay with the penal code. Here's the problem, and you've seen this. In Harris County, and we did a show about this last week. Last year, there were 2,800 firearms stolen out of vehicles. Mm-hmm. Vehicle burglaries are not considered violent crimes. And so everybody that commits a burglary of a motor vehicle and steals our firearms is selling them in the black market to criminals that can't legally buy firearms because they're felons, right? They're given a free $100 personal recognizance bond paid for by you and me, and those are the people committing heinous crimes. And so the argument is, it's a downward spiral in the society. Now everyone's armed. There's no consequences for stealing the firearms of law-abiding citizens because the judges in Harris County are giving them a, get out of jail free card. So, I see both sides of the argument. But, my answer is, Andrea, I'd rather be armed.
Right. Same here.
Yeah.
You know what? I never thought to learn. I never thought that I wanted to have a gun. Never. Till last year, when the pandemic and when we start seeing the change of everything in this country, the security, the crime rate. And now I want to learn because I'm a single mom. I have 2 kids living with me. Sometimes they spend time with the dad and I'm by myself in my house. And I don't know what can happen. And I'm totally disarmed. I want to learn how to. The other day we went to, I remember one day you and I went dinner and he was carrying his gun. And I have a big purse, and he said like, "Oh, he just put it like this," and I was like a shaking.
That's TMI. Too much information.
Yeah, I was shaking. Well, you have a permit.
I do, but I need to have it on my person.
Yeah,
not in your purse.
And I was like, "What are you doing?"
It'll be fixed in September.
I said, "What are you doing, Orlando?" He was like, "Oh, why you're afraid?" They're like, "Oh my God, I never saw a gun like like this."
I don't know I don't know.
But now I want to learn.
Yeah.
Because really it's important.
We even have that conversation with my children because the school system with all the media hype. They never have we had a generation arguing against their rights. And my girls grew up with mom and dad armed. We got the license when it first came out. I have a Mini 14 and the gun that's so terrible. It's not a military grade weapon, y'all.
Right.
It's a semi-automatic.
Well, I grew up in a
22.
country with guns everywhere.
Yeah, so I'd rather have an 16, but they're not giving those to us former military guys to carry.
It cracks me up how the media narrative is the AR. The AR is a assault weapon. Come on, these people. Of course, every firearm is an assault weapon if you're intending to assault somebody.
Well, the stat is that hammers actually kill more people than the AR-15 does.
Even a car is an assault weapon.
Yeah, and most liberals don't know the difference between a revolver, a semi-automatic, or an automatic pistol.
So that's the challenge we have: the education.
Yeah.
Education is education. We've been talking in this show every single week about that because at the end of the day, whatever is going on, the key is education, a lack of education. And as you were saying, the kids, this generation, the Generation Z that you were talking about, and the millennials, they're not learning what we were learning. Especially you guys that you guys were, grew up in this country. I didn't. But I remember in my time, we were like, it was history, and it was like world history, and it was Colombian history. And these days, they're not learning none of those things.
And if you know history, when the government disarms the people, it's not a very pretty sight.
Yeah, no, it's not. And I was thinking when Andrea was talking, when she says she toted my firearm when we were out. I don't know if Andrea lived here, but many years ago in Temple, Texas, at a Luby's, there was a mass shooting. A man came in and systematically started shooting, and so. Had someone been armed in the restaurant, dozens of lives would have been saved.
Yeah.
Because someone would have taken him out.
Of course.
Yeah. So that's the argument for arming citizens, because you can't always rely on the police being there, especially in Houston, because everybody knows you call a police officer and it can take 3 hours.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Especially now.
They just fill in paperwork, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And I'm not bashing police officers who do a great job. We just don't have police officers because we don't have the money. The city's broke.
Way understaffed.
And way understaffed. And you're on your own, folks.
And nobody wants to become a police officer anymore.
And I'm all for training. So you have a lot of civilians that probably have a lot more training than like even me as a Marine. Because they've invested, they went to different programs, tactical classes or whatever. So we definitely want to promote that. But if we start getting into a debate about training, well, you got Navy SEALs are far more trained than maybe I am as a Marine. Then it gets down to what level of training can we agree on? You know what I'm saying? That it becomes,
Yeah, well, I think it's like driving. Not everybody has the skills to drive and be on the freeway, but hey, if you pass the test, you get a license.
Yeah.
So, I think as long as you know how to operate a firearm safely And
well, there's probably a lot of people out there driving with no licenses, right?
Yeah, or insurance.
That too. Yeah, here, no, around the country.
All right, Andy, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to come spend time with us and, share what you're doing in the community and your activism and just your service to our country. We really appreciate that.
Thank you.
I want to tell you guys that this whole issue of the Delta variant with respect to the COVID-19 is heating up again. Now the debate is coming back up as to whether or not we're going to have lockdowns or whether or not we're going to have masks, whether or not the government is going to mandate that you now subject to the jab or the vaccination. And so there are a lot of questions. Some people now believe that the vaccinations are not effective because we have thousands and thousands of cases across the country, which are considered breakthrough cases. That is, people that have received both the Moderna and the Pfizer are now coming down with the Delta variant, albeit not as severe, and that it is true that their hospitalization rates and mortality rates are lower. But the fact is that the Delta variant is affecting people that are wholly vaccinated. So the question becomes then, why should I get vaccinated if a vaccine isn't protecting me against the Delta variant? So there are some interesting questions. There's a lot of confusion. Hospitals claim that the beds being occupied by COVID patients are on the rise again. And as we end summer, we're going to be less outdoors and more indoors. And everybody knows that indoor gatherings is a petri dish for the spread of viruses and bacteria and diseases. So we may go through another period in where we have a spike, Andrea.
And also, we are about to start school also. So
yeah, we're about to start school. And since we don't have the mask mandate, which personally, and I'm not a physician, I think that the masks help keep down the incidence of flu because influenza was virtually non-existent last season. So it's going to be real interesting, and certainly I'm just giving you observations that I make. I'm not qualified as a physician, as a scientist, or a researcher. So having said that, we are working to have one of the premier epidemiologists from the University of Texas Health Science Center who has been on our programs before, not on our live program here through TLC Live, but he has been on our teletown hall meetings where we do have live call-ins with 25,000 Texans participating. And so we're trying to work him into the schedule so we can talk about issues that are important to you. So I'm hoping to have the epidemiologist coming up soon.
Yeah,
we're going to continue our conversation, Andrea, about crime in Harris County, how it's out of control, with our panel coming up in a couple of weeks. So thank you for joining us. As you know, we're a volunteer organization. We're supported by our generous donors. If you want to make a contributions to Texas Latino Conservatives and all the good works we do, either through our political action committee, helping young candidates, and particularly Hispanic candidates that are conservatives, that's what we call building the farm team here in Texas of the future political leaders, make a contribution to our PAC. If you want to help educate the community, as Andy and I and Andrea were talking about, because education is important, we do that through our 501c4. So if you're more comfortable making a donation so that we can educate the community on getting more involved in the political process, how to encourage them to run for precinct chairs in different counties in Texas, how to run for office, how to become an activist, we do that through the 501c4. But you got to go online, TexasLatinoConservatives.com, and there's a lot of information. Subscribe to our newsletter, or just watch us every Wednesday as we do this every Wednesday at 11 o'clock, más o menos. Así que, Andrea.
And the last call, call to action. What the community can help you to help?
So if you're a veteran, get in touch with the American Legion. If you're a Marine veteran, go check out the Marine Corps League. And if you're a veterans business owner, we'd love you to Google Veterans Business Force here in Houston. I want to give a shout out to Kathy Bowersox, who's a civilian that started that. And we also have a Veterans Business Chamber that's being founded here in Houston with Dave Weaver. So again, Veterans Business Chamber and the Veterans Business Force.
And we want to thank Vicki, who had some technical issues, but for her involvement in the community with the GI Forum and, of course, with her LULAC organization, so hopefully we'll get her back on the program.
Bueno, pues nos vemos el próximo miércoles en TLC, como siempre, todos los miércoles, TLC a las 11, más o menos.
Más o menos. Bueno, nos vemos. Chao.
Ciao,
Hasta
ciao.
luego.